this to the gate of the transistor, which is this pin right here. And you can tell because if it's facing you, the gate is the one all the way on the right. If it's facing away, it's the one on the left. That's going to be where your sensor goes, is right there. So, I'll put that into my helping hands. And I believe they have several sets of helping hands over at the Makerspace in 1819.
Okay.
Now, they got all these tools, so if I'm not around to loan them, you can get them there. So I'm just going to take this rod and clean it. This will also be good practice for me whenever I get around to making mine. Now you always want to preheat where your stuff goes by touching your soldering iron to it, and that will make the solder just flow onto it nicely, or it should. It's also worth noting, I'm using lead solder.
Okay.
Don't breathe that in.
Okay.
Because it's lead. Not super happy with how that went. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Okay, that's your first connection. So when it comes time to put this on the skirt, you just plug that into your output pin.
Okay.
Okay, so you see how the solder flowed really nicely around that because I preheated it.
Okay.
That's why you do that. Next, I do believe I'm going to take this to the negative wire, and then the negative wire I will take over to the spring.
Okay. We should use 2 different color wires.
Yes. For me, negative is always black.
Okay.
Now, when you go to Home Depot, if you plan on getting your own wire strippers, get this kind. It's about the same as the cheap red pair, but these are so much nicer, and they can actually work on smaller cables, which is great.
Could I get a soldering stand and helping hands at Home Depot?
I'm not sure. I got them both on the internet, so, you know, check it out. Let me know what you find. Okay. Here's a pro tip. When you have stranded wire like this, so there's several tiny different wires inside of it, the best way to deal with that is to flare them out a bit.
Okay.
Like this, and then twist them. Flaring them out like that just ensures that you get a nice tight twist.
Okay.
So now this is going to go on the center pin, because this is going to go to the L wire. And then this pin over here is going to go to the ground. Everything will have a common ground, so we'll get to that last. I'm going to put this guy in here. I'm going to put this little tiny wire in here. Just maneuver it until they're laying on top of each other. Ooh, hold on. I'm gonna go grab my tiny pliers. Because the nice thing is, now that we're no longer on a breadboard, we can move these individual components out of each other's way. Just as long as you don't break them, you'll be fine. And that'll make it a little bit easier to make sure you don't accidentally solder two things together that aren't supposed to go together.
Cool.
For that matter, I'm going to get this guy out of the way in the other direction. Okay. So now, if I so choose, I can even wrap this wire a little bit around the pin so that it stays a bit more while I'm soldering.
That won't create like a shorting?
No. As long as it's not touching any of the other pins, you'll be fine. Same situation though, you gotta heat up where your solder's gonna go, and then it should flow onto the components very smoothly. Just like that. Good habit to note is that I always blow on my connections, because it'll still be hot, but there's so little mass that it'll cool down pretty quickly. But you don't want to burn yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are all good. Now I need the diode. Now the important thing with the diode is basically this is just like a one-way connection. So it protects the rest of the circuit from back voltages. So you'll see a ring around the diode. That ring, think of that as the wall. So that's where the voltage stops. So you want that facing away from the transistor, because we want to protect the transistor and everything that comes before it.
That little thing?
Yes. I'm pointing that out now because the very next thing that I'm going to connect to is the spring. So, actually what I'll do is cut this guy right here, strip it, and I believe this is 22 gauge wire. So I'll just go down there, give it a little twist and a little yank. Which sounds much worse than I intended it to. I am sorry. Kind of funny though. Especially when you're using stranded wires, you want to make sure that you don't go too small, because you don't want to accidentally clip any of those cables in there.
Yeah.
Same story. I'm going to flare these out a bit, and then I'll twist them to keep them tight together. Just a bit. You don't need to go, full fan. Just enough so that you get some finger on each one of them. So you get a nice tight twist like that. Yeah? All right. And then this guy is going to go right around this spring. Yeah. In this case, you can either go straight to the plate of the battery. You could go to where the plate is soldered on, or you can go to the spring. I'm going to go for the spring because it's really easy. Just slip it through and hook it back around. So I'll actually put a little hook in it to start. Okay. Yes, indeed. Don't let the phone die. Always makes me feel naked when that happens in the middle of the day.
Okay.
Okay. So do you see this? Where it mostly bubbled on the stranded wire, but barely wrapped around the spring. So I'm going to try and just use my soldering iron to paint it onto the spring a little bit more for a more solid connection.
Okay.
And that looks better now. Have you ever welded before?
Nope.
Oh, I was about to say, soldering is easy compared to welding. So if you've done that, then you'll be golden for this. Okay. So that's all good there. Now,